Hey guys, it's Maymay and welcome to Stampin' Saturday. Now I took some cardstock to make this card in 3 different sizes. The first piece is 4 by 5 1/4. The other two, I can't remember the size of them. I just cut them smaller than each other so that they would stack on top of each other. And I took some temporary adhesive and then stacked them up and stuck them down. You've seen us do this before. We're doing that thing where we stack the cardstock up and then we stamp around the edges so we can get that cool kind of carry over effect from each piece. My adhesive was a little too sticky, so you saw me use my fingers to take some of the sticky off. That's what I was doing. Now this is super cool. These are the clickable letters from Brutus Monroe. Now we carry these in the store. Everybody's been asking me about them. They sell out super fast, so grab them while you can. We've got more coming. I took these and instead of laying the letters side by side, I laid the letters on top of each other to make the word amazing. So the word now goes from the top of the page to the bottom as you read it. Now I stamped this in the middle of the smallest piece of cardstock, which is going to be the focal point of the card. So now amazing is running down the card. The next thing I did is I took those same clickable letters, but this time we're going to do the word grace. Now where the A is in the middle, I took one piece and I flipped it upside down. That will be so that there will be no stamping happening under that piece. Only the GR and the CE will actually stamp. The space in the middle will be where the A in amazing is already living on the card. So now I'm going to ink this up and then I'll stamp it right over that A. It's pretty easy to line up. You'll see me get my head in, but you can get underneath and kind of see where those letters are going and then place that down. And notice I do this tiny wiggle. It looks like a big wiggle, but it's not. It's a tiny wiggle just to make sure I get all the edges of the letters. Don't wiggle too much. You might get some ink on the edges of your stamp on there. So just a tiny wiggle. Now I'm just going to stack all these guys back on top of each other because it's time to do that stamping that I told you that runs off the edges. So taking the stamp set called Garden Party, I'm going to stamp several different small flowers on and off of those different layers. Now when we do this, what happens is we end up with a stamped image on all of the layers that we're crossing over. So at the end, when we put some dimension between these layers, they just kind of look really cool, like the paper was cut perfectly to be designed that way. Now I play around with the flowers. I love the fact that nowadays we can see through our stamps. We know exactly where they're going. And you might think, you messed that one up. And I could have, but I keep playing and I keep going and we'll see what happens. I'm really going to use 2 flowers and 3 leaf images from the stamp set. Using my oxides again, those oxide inks in me, I can't get rid of them. They're right on the edge of my work surface and I pick them up constantly and use them all the time. I love the greens. I love how vibrant they are. I have yet to wet them to play with them like they're supposed to be used like for mixed media. I keep telling you guys that, but I love them so much, I just keep playing with them just like they are. The only thing I would caution you on is the style of stamp pad that it has kind of a texture to it. So when you're inking up a stamp, make sure you run that stamp all around that ink pad to get good coverage on your stamp. But they work beautifully. So now you can see I'm just stamping leaves here and there. Now I'm going to take some orange marmalade and using the same flower as the large one, but the smaller version from the stamp set, I'm going to go and kind of fill in with a pop of color. I love pink and orange together. It's 2 of my favorite combinations, and I just think this really looks very pastel-y and very Eastery. Imagine other words you could do with this crossover section. You know, have you seen people kind of take the word like mother and then they put a different word all the way around? You'll probably see me do that where like M is for, mother, and then the O has some other word that goes with it. I bet we'll see that come up because these clickable letters are super fun for that sort of thing. You guys will probably beat me to it, I'm sure. So if you do, share photos with us. We want to see it. You can do that on my Facebook page, or my Facebook group, which is called Maymay Made It, and so did I. So stamping, filling in. And this, originally I was going to use just 4 stamps, just 2 flowers and 2 leaves. Well, as I did this, I thought, I need to break the edges up a little bit. I had everything kind of gathered in the corners, and I thought I need to kind of pull this out and break up the edges. So I went in with another leaf, and this time instead of getting inside of my bouquet of flowers there, I kind of pulled it out to kind of break it up and make it a little looser, as if you kind of dropped the flowers on the page and some of them had kind of spread out. Notice my scrubber sitting there in the corner. I love it. I scrub the little stamps off right after using them and then put them right away and they're clean instantly. Super cool tool. Okay, now I am going to pull these guys apart. I let them dry for a second and it's time to ink the edges. So I'm going to take some Vintage Photo Distress ink. This is not an oxide. This is just the distress ink. Using an ink blending tool and my trash tool. That's what I'm calling that thing underneath. It is like something I harvested from the trash because I don't save my stamp sets in their original packaging. And instead of throwing it away, I've been using it like this and I love it. So I'm calling it a trash tool. In the comments below, tell me your favorite trash tool, something you have harvested from the trash that you've turned into a tool in your craft room. So my craft mat is a trash tool. Anyway, I ink blend this ink all the way around all three edges that we had stamped so that they'll have a little more separation whenever we put the card together. It's already looking cool. I love this look of this card. Now I thought I'd show you how I pick a base for the card. I like to take a bunch of colors of cardstock and just slide it under what I've created until I see the color that pops and says, that is the one. And it wasn't hard to see that this was the card base. But if you ever struggle with that, just do that. Lay your front piece down or your background down and slide colored cardstock underneath until it pops, and that'll be the base that you want to choose. I cut that piece down to be an A2 size card. I'm going to score it at 5.5 and then fold it and bone fold it. I love orange. This orange and this pink is just such a pretty combination to me. So get this guy ready for the card. Now what we're going to do is add a little glue to the first layer. I'm going to glue the first largest layer directly to the card front. We're not going to use any dimension on this one. We're just going to glue that down. And when I was editing this, I noticed how crooked this was. But you know what? I don't do perfect. So the card turns out fine. I don't think anybody will notice. It's a little bit crooked on the mat. I did take the time to peel this adhesive off that I'd used previously. You really didn't have to do that. You're not going to see it, but it's just a thing I wanted to get it off of there. Now I'm going to use some foam squares, and I'm using plenty. I'm going to put 2 in the top corners and bottom corners, 1 in the middle, and then I was going to put another one on either side, and before I did that, I thought, you know what, wait, let's cut one in half and just put half of one on either side. I just didn't think it needed a full one, and you can do this all the time. You can cut your foam squares down to whatever size you need, and that way you're not wasting any. And even though I wanted a good bit of foam squares here to be a good support for the next base going on top, I still didn't feel it was wasteful. Now I want a little wiggle room, so I'm adding some wet glue to the top of my foam squares just so I have just a little bit of time when I put this down to wiggle this into place where it needs to be. That's a really good tip if you're using foam or some adhesive like that. If you add a little wet glue, you can get a little wiggle room. I didn't add wet glue to this one because I felt like I could line it up pretty good, so that's just foam squares and lining it straight up. I really love how this card is turning out. But when I get to this point, I think, this guy needs a little sparkle. So I dig into my kind of glitter glues, and I find this one from Nouveau. This is honey gold, and it was really, really pretty. And it's hard for you to see what I'm doing because what I'm trying to do with the bottle is I'm trying to hold it straight up and bring the bead straight up. So when it dries, it won't be kind of a sideways blob, but more of a dot of the adhesive of this glitter glue. That was hard to explain, but I don't want it to kind of go everywhere. I want it to be a nice full dot. So notice how I'm holding it straight up. I'm pressing it to get the bead and then pulling up, almost like if you were using icing on a cake. Then I decided to kind of run some of those dots off of the flowers as well, just for some extra added prettiness. Now for the inside of the card, when you're using a solid color card base like I am with that orange, you might want to add a different inside so you'll have a place to write and be able to see clearly. So I took a piece of white cardstock, and this is the trellis or the garland stamp from that same stamp set called Garden Party, and I'm going to stamp it in the middle of the side of the page. Then I'm going to bring my trash tool back in because I don't want to mess up my work surface, and I'm going to ink up just the edges of this same stamp, and I'm going to finish this off so that that trellis or garland runs all the way down the sheet. It's obviously a garland because a trellis holds flowers, right? I think it's a garland. So we're going to stamp that all the way down. Then I'm just going to take some of the flower stamps we used on the front in the same colors of ink and fill in around it to kind of decorate the edge of that page that's going on the inside of the card. Now you could do anything. You could do the same florals that you did on the front. You could mimic that. You could use a different stamp set altogether. I just thought it'd be pretty to have a little bit of color on the inside of the card like we do on the outside of the card. This little orange flower is fun for filling in the spaces. A tip I always like to share is this. When you're doing something like this, make sure you stamp on and off the page. That's what makes it look more professional. It makes it look like you have actual paper that was cut because the images kind of carry off the edge of the page. You can see I'm doing that there. Next, it is time for a sentiment. And on this one, I used a sentiment from my stamp set called Risen. And this one says, "May you always live in the joy of your salvation through Christ Jesus." I thought that was perfect for the cross on the front. Then, full disclosure, I went ahead and glued this into my card base and realized I had not inked the edges, so I peeled it out of my card as quickly as I could, brought it back over to my work surface, and inked the edges to match. I do that all the time. I'm the queen of forgetting to ink something. So you'll see now I'm gluing this in. I also should have probably added the stickles last, but I kind of got ahead of myself, so I'm trying to be careful with the front because they're not quite dry on the front. I say stickles, it's Nuvo drops, but they weren't quite dry, so I was trying to be very careful. But there's the card. I love how it turned out. I cannot wait to see what you guys do with those clickable letters. I know you're going to do amazing. So when you make a card using them or any other project, share it with us over on our Facebook group called Maymay Made It, and so did I. I hope you have a blessed Easter and a wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys again real soon. Have a great one, guys. Bye-bye.